Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Green and White, brought to you by Argyle Life. In an alternate universe, Argyle blazed to victory against Stockport County yesterday at Home Park in the first leg of the League One playoff semi-finals. But in this reality, Stevenage wasted their place by forgetting how to defend, even though that's like the only thing that they're supposed to be good at. We're here to bring you not a game review, but a look back on what has been just a truly bonkers season. Finished 8th in League One. I think if you'd predicted that at the beginning of the season, not sure if anyone here did predict exactly 8th place, Sam. You might have thought it would be not the most exciting campaign, but that does not even begin to tell the story. Joining me to tell that story, we have Sam, we have Graham, and we have a very special guest, Chris Errington, the ever reliable Argyle correspondent from Plymouth Live and the Herald, who joins us. And yeah, we're delighted to have you. Just one quick piece of housekeeping, and I'm sure we'll be in your feeds with a full update on this in the days to come. But we're planning on sort of splitting our season review content into 2 episodes. One tonight that will be more of a kind of narrative talk through of what happened. We'll then have our end of season awards ceremony, I believe, next week, and that will be confirmed on our socials. But that means we won't be discussing player of the season and other individual accolades tonight. So, Chris, given that you have so kindly given up your Sunday evening to be with us, I'll start with you. You've obviously covered Argyle for many years. Where does this season, as a kind of overview to begin with, rank in insanity? Because there have been some pretty crazy ones in that time, but this one for me is right up there.
Absolutely, no doubt at all. Thanks very much for the invite to join you guys tonight as well, first of all. It's been an amazing season because up until November, December time, it felt like we were fighting to stay in League One, and then everyone's ended up being disappointed not to make it into the playoffs. And as you rightly say, when you watch those 2 playoff games yesterday, over the weekend, Stevenage, Stockport, Bolton, Bradford, the way Argyle finished the season, we wouldn't have been frightened to play any of those 4 teams. No. Stevenage are a bit like Lincoln Light, aren't they? They're good at doing the basics, and they would be difficult to overcome. But none of those 4 teams that I saw would have frightened me if Argyle were playing them, particularly with a fully fit Tolai and Pepple up front and everything clicking as it was towards the end of the season. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? Disappointed to miss out on the playoffs, but very relieved that they managed to turn it around so well. So I've 29 seasons I've been watching Argyle now, reporting on Argyle now, and Graham, we go back many years, and we've seen
29 years, Chris, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because when I first moved down to Plymouth, Graham and I were living in the same place in Plymouth for a while. So a long time ago, a few nights had in the Fortescue and Mutley Plain. Happy memories of that.
Yeah.
And here we are all these years later doing a podcast that no one would have ever imagined what would be happening then. So no, as in terms of an Argyle season, really eventful. I think in the end, we're going into the summer and into next season much more stable and with a bit more hope for the future than we were this time last year. So although they didn't make the playoffs, although they weren't promoted, I think certainly on the pitch, Argyle's in a better place now.
Yeah, and we'll talk through this, chronologically a little bit, because you mentioned, the next season maybe things will be looking a bit more positive than they were going into this season. But actually, a year ago, this week, I guess, despite the fact we've been relegated, I think there was some cause for optimism. Miron Muslic obviously had done a very, very good job with us in the championship, and it looked like he was going to stay after some performed histrionics, shall we say. And it felt like if he was going to be in charge, we'd have a really good opportunity to come straight back up. Of course, he then was still at the club as we signed our first couple of players over the summer, but then he left. Tom Cleverley came in, obviously a very different character with a very different style. There was lots of upheaval. The squad was basically ripped apart and then put back together again. We had pre-season. Obviously, Sam and I very much enjoyed our trip over to Austria to watch probably the only time Argyle will ever play Eintracht Braunschweig. And despite losing that game, I think there was some cautious optimism. I mean, certainly I was optimistic. And then it started, Sam, just about as badly as it could possibly have started.
The thing that I keep coming back to, and I will try and be brief tonight, which I know I'm not really good at because I want to let Chris speak as much as possible. But the thing that I keep coming back to is the 4 league losses in a row to start the season, and then the 5 league losses in a row between October and November. And we missed that. That was 9 losses in 2 different losing runs. 9 losses came from long losing runs. If we'd have turned even 2 of those 9 losses into draws, we'd be sat here reviewing the game against Stockport yesterday. If we'd have even just, that Orient game on that dismal Tuesday night, which is probably the most I've ever heard a crowd turn on the club since the days of administration. If we'd have just turned that game into a draw, if we'd have even Mansfield away when we had 2, a pretty poor performance, but we actually had 2 big chances in the second half. If we'd have just turned that one into a draw and everything else stayed the same, we would be here in the playoffs. So I think what it really comes down to is we just can't give such a head start. Because if we'd have even had a poor first half of the season rather than a dismal first half of the season, even a poor first half of the season would have been enough that we could have made the playoffs.
I would argue we were past the dismal line on the poor to catastrophic spectrum. It was much closer to the catastrophic end of it, I think.
Yeah, we literally, as a certain somebody who may or may not be to the left of me on the screen said, we were literally bottom going into the Port Vale game on November the 22nd. And that is remarkable. What I think is just as remarkable, if not more so, is we were still in the relegation zone going into the win against Burton home on the 4th of January this year. Yeah. We were 21st, but still very much in the relegation zone. And I think what it comes down to is, and yes, we can look at stuff like game management in the Bolton game management in the Exeter game, but what it really comes down to more than anything is we just left ourselves too much to do. That first half of the season was just too much of a difficult position. We achieved form from the obviously the Port Vale game was a win. We then lost at home to Northampton, lost at home to Bradford. But then if you go from the Wickham away game, which was where the sustained run of form started, from Wickham away onwards, our form was certainly automatic promotion worthy. In many seasons would even have been title worthy. It was over 2 points a game. And if you go over 2 points a game, you're giving yourself a pretty good chance of winning the title. So it was pretty much borderline league title worthy form from the Wickham game onwards. And it just wasn't enough because we were just left ourselves in such a difficult position with how awful it was from August to early December. So I think that's got to be the main talking point, because we talk about recruitment. Now, I view, and I'm not going to go into my full view on this now, because I'm sure this will be a later question, but I view, do we need to give credit to the club for the recruitment? I view it actually 2 ways. For the quality of the recruitment, yes, Arseni, Peppel, clearly fantastic pickups, and the January recruitment, pretty much flawless. But the quality of recruitment is a different thing to the timing and the sort of squad management of recruitment. We left too much to the end of the window. We left Tolai and Ross to the last week of the window. We left Mitchell to the penultimate week of the window. And we just, again, the team we had for those first 4 games of the season was probably a relegation quality team. And then we brought in players and other players came back from fitness. But it all comes back to the same central thing. We can't keep on giving so much of a head start. That was what we did, and it cost us very badly.
Yeah, Graham, I'll come to you on that question, actually, which Sam sort of teed me up nicely to ask. How do you sort of reflect on last summer with the benefit of hindsight? Because I think at the time it looked, there were disagreements as to whether we were signing young players with potential or people who looked like duds. I think there were certainly eyebrows raised about the Peppel signing, given he was far down the pecking order of a rival team and hadn't really had minutes above League Two. Then obviously we had that terrible start, but now some of that recruitment looks unbelievably good in hindsight. I think there was a lot of criticism of Tom Randall, who's obviously no longer at the club, that went around last summer. Is he fully owed an apology? Are the club owed an apology for that, do you think, or is it a bit more?
Well, if you remember on the 1st of December, Simon Hallett, when he was faced with a fairly hostile audience, admitted that the recruitment had been poor. That was December. And that, I think that was the general view at that time. But
well, Graham, I would just quite say quickly, I don't think it was even an admission, really. They were basically throwing the recruitment team under the bus as the kind of explanatory factor for the whole failure.
Yeah. But as short a time ago as 1st of December when the fans forum was, he came out and said that. So, and it was the general view that the fans held, I think. But as Sam pointed out, from January onwards, we were team transformed. But recruitment, the percentage success in recruitment is rarely above 50%. I think the average is 48%. And Chris will remember Luggy saying that 1 in 2 of his signings was successful. So when you actually reflect at the end of the season, the recruitment, on the whole, you've got to say it's been successful, and more successful than most teams, and was one of the principal reasons why we gathered momentum from January onwards. But I just want to go back to the first 4 games of the season, and Sam, you mentioned the Orient game. I remember Richie Wellens, and Chris will remember, press conference afterwards saying Orient lost their first 4 games last season and they got in the playoffs, and everybody was ridiculing him, so that's impossible. Derek Adams did very much the same in 2017-18. So yes, it was a poor start, but it's not how you start the season, it's how you end it. And I think we ended it fantastically. Yes, you can pick games, Bolton or Exeter, particular games, Rotherham away, which cost us. But let's be honest, and you call it a bonkers season, we almost pulled off the most remarkable promotion, or certainly getting into the playoffs, that the club, I think it would only been the 3rd time in the history of the league that a team would have got from bottom into the playoffs when they were bottom at the turn of the year. So a remarkable achievement, and I think we'll come on to some of the reasons why. But recruitment-wise, I think everyone's got to hold their hands up because there were many posts on Passotti, and the general view at the time throughout the early days of the season, it wasn't what we'd hoped. In the end, it turned out to be excelling our best expectations.
Yeah, we lost Chris for a moment, but since you're back, obviously we had that little improvement in September with that very memorable win at Kenilworth Road, and then obviously beating Stockport at home as well. But then came that game away at Exeter, and then sort of I think a period, even though I think we did actually have that win at Port Vale in there, I think really bookended by that terrible defeat at home to Northampton, which for me was the real nadir of the season. I mean, I know I was in New Zealand about to get on a ferry with a terrible hangover, and the chat was buzzing with rumours that Cleverley was gone, or that he might be going. And then of course Simon and others came out and said he's not going, and we're going to give him time to turn it around. And obviously, during that period as well, Derek Adams came in, which was quite a surprising piece of news, not as manager, but as director of football. There were national football lower league journalists saying that Derek, would probably, the odds would be good on him being the manager by Christmas. What was your sort of sense, during that time? It was incredibly turbulent. There was lots of different indicators and rumors kind of flying around. What was the kind of atmosphere in the club? Do you think there was actually a threat to Cleverley more so than they let on? It seems to me hard to believe that if the form had continued to be as bad, that he would have survived, for too much longer. I mean, how did you perceive that particular moment in the season?
I think, having gone through the various head coaches and managers that Argyle have been through since Stephen Schumacher left, I think there would have been a reluctance at the top of the club, Simon Hallett and various other people running the club, to change Tom Cleverley so soon into his first season. I think they'd have been very loath to do that. And if you look back to when Tom was appointed last summer, a lot was made by Tom and by the club as well about both were looking for long-term stability. Tom Cleverley was looking for a club that he felt that he would be able to spend a couple of years at and put his own mark on. And Argyle, having gone through Ian Foster, Wayne Rooney, Miran Muslic, you can argue about the whys and wherefores of their appointments, but I'm sure Argyle, one of the reasons they appointed Tom Cleverley would have been they thought, yeah, this is a guy that we could see working with for at least a couple of years and building that stability, which Argyle had been based on, because when you look from like Derek Adams through to Steven Schumacher, that was a fairly stable period in terms of managers. And that's when Argyle got their best results. Then we went through the period of changing managers, sometimes through Argyle's choice, other times, Miran, for example, leaving. It just causes turbulence. And when you have turbulence off the pitch at the football club, it nearly always translates to on the pitch. And so I think when we were in November time, I remember the Huddersfield away game, November the 8th, I think it was. At the end of that game, when the players and Tom Cleverley went across to nearly 1,000 Argyle fans in West Yorkshire on a Saturday in early November, that they were made well aware of the, fill in the blanks, the anger, the disappointment, the frustration, whatever word you want to choose would apply. And, when you're sat writing something up after the game with Tom Cleverley's quotes, you are wondering, does he survive this? Now, a couple of weeks after that Huddersfield game, there was the Port Vale game. It was the two bottom teams in the division. I think as much as Argyle would have been reluctant to change manager, it's hard not to at least seriously consider that if they'd lost the Port Vale that day, it's hard not to believe they wouldn't seriously have considered changing the manager. But they won that game. And yes, they had a couple of little blips, as Sam's just mentioned. Northampton was a bad day, although Laurent Talai getting sent off didn't help. Then they lost at home to Bradford. And again, you're thinking, is this getting a bit towards the end of the road for Tom Cleverley? And it's funny, Wycombe on a Tuesday night in early December, I don't think anyone went there expecting a great deal, but Owen Aseni came up with a really good goal. And, when you look back, as we are now, that Wycombe on a Tuesday night, there was hardly any Wycombe fans there that night. It's the smallest crowd I've ever seen at Adams Park. It felt a very low-key, flat. Nobody felt confident about anything. But that win really was really important. And I think from then on, from that Wycombe game on, you felt Tom Cleverley had learnt about League One, had learnt about his players, had realised that certain styles weren't going to work. And they initially started by just getting some scrappy, horrible 1-0 wins, Port Vale, Wycombe. And then when confidence comes, when players grow in belief, and then we get into February and March, and then all of a sudden we're going to Blackpool and scoring 4, and we're going to Wigan on a Tuesday night and scoring 3. And I'm a big believer confidence in football is just absolutely huge. You can't coach it, you can't buy it. But when you get some confidence, does it make difference to players. And I think we've definitely seen that.
Chris, do you think one of the defining moments was Derek Adams at the Fans Forum so effusively giving his support for Tom, saying he was an excellent head coach and he had great faith in him? And you could almost see, the press conferences are wonderful things. I know you're there. You can see you're close up to Tom. You saw how he was more comfortable after that decision. And as these press conferences go on, he's grown in confidence with his relationship with you and fellow journalists. And that confidence sort of spread through the team. I think the one thing you haven't mentioned was the change in formation, which I think was perhaps the most fundamental change that changed their fortunes.
And that sort of coincided with Derek's return to the club as director of football, Graham. And I know people sort of say, well, was the only reason we changed formation and style of play because Derek told Tom to do that or suggested strongly? I'm a big believer that Derek Adams, most of his involvement at the club since he's come back has been in recruitment and off the pitch and being a good sounding board for Tom. I don't think he's gone in there and said to Tom, you must play 4-4-2 or you should play 4-4-2.
Derek rarely played 4-4-2 anyway. It wasn't
exactly. But I think I think the switch in formation and Derek arriving at about the same time, there was a sort of perception that was the case. I do think Derek's return was excellent. I think it's easy to forget Tom Cleverley's 36. Yes, he's coached in the Championship for 15 months, but he's very new to the job, and it's unrealistic to expect anyone early in their career to be excellent at it. And I think Derek coming in, being a sounding board, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? What would you have done in this circumstance? When you were manager and we were having to play Saturday, Tuesday, back-to-back away games, what did you do? And it's all those things that I think that Derek coming back helped with. And I also think that, of course, when he came back, everyone was thinking, well, they'll give Tom Cleverley 2 or 3 more games, and then if it doesn't work out, they've got the immediate replacement there. But I don't think Derek came back thinking he'd be the next manager. Now, he might have been if things had gone horribly wrong, but I don't think he came back to Plymouth Argyle to be the next manager. I think he came back because he saw the opportunity to really shape the club. And Graham, you know, and Sam and John will as well, I'm sure, that when Derek was manager of Argyle, there was a spell where he was head of football. They changed his title from manager
he did everything.
to head of football. So it's not the first time that Derek has had a very wide-ranging role at this football club. So, yeah, I think his return was really important, but I think it would be unfair to Tom to say that he's basically just piggybacked off what Derek Adams suggested or advised him to do.
Yeah, and just quickly, incredible personal growth from Sam, who let you say that it would be unrealistic to expect an early career coach to have immediate success without jumping in and mentioning the name Stephen Schumacher. So there we go. We could all change. Chris, were you, just quickly on this, were you surprised to see Derek come back? I mean, what was your reaction when you first got wind of that happening? Yeah,
totally surprised. Didn't see that one coming at all. When you look back at the way it ended for Derek as the manager, it really unraveled fairly spectacularly. Unfortunately, no one wanted to see it like that, but it did. So I wasn't expecting that. When you have time to digest it and you go back to the fact that he had been the head of football and he'd been very much almost like when Derek Adams arrived as manager at 2015, Argyle was nowhere near the club that it is now. It was very much smaller. Derek was almost, I think it's fair to say, manager, chief executive, recruitment man. He probably did 3 or 4 jobs that are done by separate people now. You look at his record, Ross County, Morecambe and Plymouth Argyle, the clubs that he's had most success with, all clubs that he's had multiple spells at, all clubs that he's clearly had an affinity for and wanted to really develop and push them on. And in all the various ways, he had a lot of success at those. So I think he was, it's easy to say with hindsight, isn't it? It could have, gone horribly wrong. But I think his appointment as a director of football was really good. It helped Tom. We've touched on the recruitment in January already. You look at Ronan Curtis, for example, that had Derek Adams' fingerprints all over it. Ronan Curtis at Portsmouth, when Derek Adams was manager of Argyle against Portsmouth, Ronan Curtis was one of those players you always looked at playing against Portsmouth thinking, I wish he's not in the team today because he always plays well against us. And then Derek, Derek, would have been very heavily involved in Ronan Curtis coming in. And then you look at the impact that he had, not only in his performance, but clearly his set pieces and everything like that. And so recruitment was good. And that's what, fills you with a bit of confidence that going into this summer, the recruitment will perhaps be more focused on players that are capable of playing in League One, of League One experience, have the understanding, have the experience, have the know-how. Whereas, we can look back at the recruitment last year and now we'll say, well, we did sign some good players. The problem with the recruitment last summer, in my opinion, was that there was not enough balance to it. There was too many 21, 22, 23 with promise, but had no League One experience, had limited first team experience, We threw them all into the team. Joe Edwards was injured, and we had nobody to provide any leadership on the pitch. To me, again, we can mention this later on, I'm sure, but Joe Rawls coming in November, he was absolutely pivotal, I think, to Argyle recovering, stopping the rot and building. His leadership, his experience, his know-how. So I think the recruitment was good in terms of the players that we got in last summer, but it wasn't balanced enough. That's the problem.
Do you also think, Chris, we lacked the physicality to deal with League One? And that was
absolutely.
And to be fair, maybe a fair criticism of Tom, he underestimated the physicality of League One, and it's quite noticeable. I think it was it may have been his dressing room comments after the game, reference to Lincoln, because Lincoln clearly have taken 2 years and a bit to get to League One standard, got athletic, physical players in their team. And I may be wrong, but we almost seem to be modelling ourselves on the way Lincoln achieved their success, and that the recruitment in the summer is going to be very much more physicality, athleticism, and hopefully experience rather than youthful opportunism.
If you can't beat them, join them, innit, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, Lincoln were,
and we couldn't
they
beat
put
them.
7 goals past us. They were far away the best team in the league. And if you look at the way they're scored and practiced, well, I can see our template following their footsteps.
Yeah, and it was interesting when I had a chance to have a speak with Tom last Tuesday, and his message was very much, we now know what we're doing. We've got the style, we've got the system, we know we've got a core of players that he can trust now, a core of players that know what he wants. Now he wants to add bits and pieces to it, and obviously there could be some departures as well, which wouldn't be ideal, but is probably going to happen. But I think he feels that, however it happens, they've come across a style which, as Sam said earlier on, from 2026, the start of 2026 onwards, only Lincoln had more points than Argyle. Now that's not over a few weeks or a month or two. That was over 4 months. That was a sustained period with 1 or 2 good additions and hopefully replacing people that leave. That's a formula that we've all seen can work for Argyle. So I can't imagine they're going to deviate too much away from that, particularly when there might be 1 or 2 teams with, reasonably significant sums of money to spend. But we've all seen that if Lincoln can do it, and to a degree Stevenage, in terms of style of play and outperforming budget, then it can work for Argyle.
Yeah, and we'll come on to more sort of forward-looking.
A quick follow-up question on that, Chris, because I noticed that at Watford, Tom Cleverley, he initially started on a 4-3-3, but he, moved a bit more pragmatically to a 3-5-2, but then tried moving, I think, back to 4-3-3 later in the season. That is very much his first choice formation. Do you think that there's any possibility that we would maybe see the same trajectory happen, whereby now we're in a bit of a better place, got a bit of a stronger baseline, he may try and move back towards something more resembling a 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, or do you think that this 4-4-2 is absolutely here to stay?
I think it's here to stay for the foreseeable future, Sam. Tom has told us on more than one occasion in a press conference, and I'm sure if he was in with this chat now with us, he would say he's very good at adapting. He's an adapter. He's not committed to any certain particular style of play. But I do think he feels that they've come across a formation that's going to work well for them. And I don't see it changing anytime soon. But results will determine that, won't it? If Argyle get off to a great start of the season, that will be the formation for the rest of the season. If we get off to a slow start, he said he's an adapter. I'm sure they'll look at different ways. So, yeah, I don't think it's here forever, Sam, but why would you change it after the last 4 months of the season?
I think that's totally valid. But then when we came 7th with 80 points in the summer of 2022, we changed from what was a 3-5-2 to a 3-4-3. And then we won the league of 101 points. You think, right, surely we'll stick to 3-4-3. But no, we went to we changed. We went to a 4 at the back over the summer in the championship. We then went to a 4-3-3. So I suppose, really, again, without adding the accusations of me being still obsessed with Steven Schumacher, I suppose maybe the point is if you're always one step ahead of the game rather than responding to what's happening, there might be a merit in that. Now, look, that's certainly not me saying I'm going to moan and groan if we play 4-4-2, but I just wonder if now that we've got the defensive side sort of locked down, if you might try and be a bit more expansive in terms of maybe having a little bit more control, not going full tiki-taka, not going 100 passes for the sake of it. But I just felt that maybe in the bolt to the next of the game, having that extra man in midfield might have really benefited us.
Sam, we scored 3 goals away from home 7 times this season. 4 games away, 4 goals twice and 5 goals once. We were very expansive away from home. The 4-4-2 worked. Why would you change it? Our results away from home have only been betted once in 100 years in terms of goals scored and wins. It was an incredible turnaround, and the 4-4-2 was the foundation of that. Why would you change it?
Well, I guess you could argue, why would you change a formation that got you 101 points, but we did. But anyway, that's my little...
I think also it might get dictated as well by what other teams do. I mean, these things are kind of faddish, and once one team changes, other teams do as well. I want to move just to... I'm sorry, Chris, I think you wanted to jump in.
All I was going to say, I don't imagine for a minute that Tom Cleverley thought at the start of last season that he would end up playing 4-4-2. No. But he learnt about his players that he had available to him. He learnt about League One. He definitely, I think it's fair to say, he perhaps didn't fully realise what League One was like. And to be fair, why would he? Been coaching in the Championship for 15 months. But this is all part of, I think, of a good coach and a good manager, is that you learn as you go along. And I think Sam's right that Shuey learnt that one style that worked in League One might not necessarily be ideal for the Championship. I think because Argyle are going to be in League One again next season, with hopefully the core of the squad that we saw in the second half of last season, I would be tempted, if it was me, to stick with what was been working, but always be mindful that other teams might think, well, we've wised up to Argyle, we know how to stop them. You have to be flexible. You have to be prepared to change tactics. But 4 months results, I can't remember the stats. They've gone for me now. Sam is much better at this than me. But the stat, I think it was 47 points from the last 23 games.
That's right. That's what you wrote in the paper, Chris.
Yeah. So
it must be true.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say that.
Hopefully. So. I think he'll stick with what he's got. He knows, he said a couple of times when I spoke to him last Tuesday, we know the system, we know the style of play. He just needs to tweak the squad. And going into pre-season, and I know we're reflecting on last season rather than going into next season, but they're in so much better position because the messages, the ideas, the whole ethos of the thing is now set. Whereas at this time, well, maybe not this time last year, but in June and July, no one really knew what the plan was. Not really.
Sam, I'll come to you. Zach Brown comments, relegated in November, you'll never sing that unless you're called Sam Down. And that is a reference to a tweet that you put out basically saying relegation is done and dusted and we need to, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but words to that effect. And it gets into what I wanted to ask you anyway, actually, which I've sort of been thinking about quite a lot. Like, do you think, because obviously we were very strident in our criticism towards the club at that time, as were lots and lots of other fans. I think there was a comment that came in from Superintendent saying that 86% of fans in a Passotti poll wanted TC gone at some time around this time. Were we wrong? Do you think we owe the club and Tom Cleverley an apology? Could we just not see it, or is that not the case? I mean, how do you sort of reflect on things that we said?
I guess I'll take this one first, just because it's probably more aimed at me than anyone else. Then I'll allow the other two to jump in. Well, look. Firstly, I think what I said about the relegation was there is absolutely ample opportunity to turn it round, but I don't think the club will do so. Therefore, I was predicting that we would stay at the bottom end and would in fact go down. Obviously, that was completely wrong on every level. They absolutely did address it hugely, not in the way that I was calling for them to do by sacking the manager. But they decided, no, we're going to keep faith in the manager. We're going to bring the director of football. We're going to change the style, but keep the good aspects and recruit accordingly. And yeah, they were absolutely right. And I was absolutely wrong. I'm not going to in any way try and water down or change what I believed. I very ardently was calling for Tom Cleverley to be fired. And I very firmly predicted that if there were not the changes made, we would be relegated. And I was absolutely wrong on both counts. And Simon Hallett, Paul Byrne, Derek Adams were absolutely right on both counts. And I can't shy away from that for a minute. Whether I owed him an apology, certainly I think I owed him an apology in the sense of, like, you know, fair play, you know what, sorry, you were right. Whether they're owed an apology for me saying it in the more philosophical sense, I think probably not, because it is ultimately a game of opinions, and that was the opinion that I sincerely held at the time. I wasn't, trying to get on their backs for the sake of it. We all want the best for Argyle, and I sincerely felt that sticking with him was not the best for Argyle, and I did turn out to be wrong. But it certainly gave me cause to reassess certain things. Like when I asked the question of Derek Adams on the 1st of December fan forum, and they actually had they actually said, if any of you feel your question wasn't answered properly, put your hand up and we'll ask you a follow-up question. And I did ask the follow-up question of, well, come on, Derek, you said you've seen stuff from Tom that's impressed you. What was it? What has impressed you? And I just maybe was thinking, well, he's just giving a load of bluff and bluster, and there isn't anything. But clearly there was stuff that was impressive. Clearly the work ethic, the professionalism, the one-to-one player directive coaching on the training ground, all absolutely categorically. There was stuff there that was underlined that they saw and I didn't, and I think it does show that. Whilst I make no apology for holding opinions firmly and for wanting what I genuinely believe is the best for the club, it is maybe, if I take anything from it, apart from don't just log in and rant and bash keyboards after losing, which I think we could probably all do less of at times. George Elick after the Ipswich game in 2023 comes to mind, where he lost his head, decided to have a go at the Not the Top 20 podcasters. But so whilst we could all do a little bit less of that, the thing I would take from it in a more calm sense is they clearly have access to information I don't. They could see stuff, on a day-to-day basis of Tom Cleverley that was worth them taking that part on him and sticking with him, and me not seeing it on that day-to-day basis maybe just didn't see that. So,
Sam, you know that video that Argyle put out of a day in Tom Cleverley's life? That's what the club saw, and that might be why they stuck with him, because they saw that. And I and Graham and John, I'm in the fortunate position where I do get to see Tom a bit behind the scenes, but none of us saw him quite like in that video. And you were perfectly right to have the opinion you did because the team were doing hopeless at the time. But they would have seen other stuff behind the scenes. And that, I think, is a lesson for all of us, me as somebody in the media, others as fans, that we judge everything purely on what we see on the pitch. But a football club and a football team and building a football team and building it is more than that. And I think that people at the club saw Tom Cleverley as we saw him in that Argyle TV thing. And so I do think that what you've just said there, Sam, is absolutely right. But they saw that, and that's probably why they stuck with him when lots of others wouldn't have done.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Again, that's very well said. And I think my kind of taking it, whilst I will still have opinions, is to maybe just to temper my opinions.
Have more correct opinions.
Yeah, have more correct opinions. Temper them a little in the light of the fact that they are operating privy to information I don't, because I do know now that if I carry on supporting Argyle and going on these podcasts, for 40 or 50 years to come, whenever I call for a manager to be sacked, there's still going to be a little boy, what about Tom Cleverley? But maybe Tom Cleverley will do terrible next season and he will get sacked, and I'll be. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm joking really with that. But a final comment that wasn't a screen a minute ago from Renzuk97, saying I was wrong to assume the club doesn't know what it's doing when it comes to underlying data. Absolutely, categorically, yes. I didn't think that Senny and Pepper would be anything like the quality they turned out to be. Like I said, I'm still not going to totally pull back on my criticism of the recruitment, because yes, although there was a lot of quality, as Chris himself said, the imbalance was still very much worthy of criticism. And it's that imbalance and the lack of timing is why we left ourselves so much to do. And ultimately, that did cost us the playoff spot. So that criticism I will stand by. But yes, in terms of the underlying data and the quality of the signings, I was wrong to assume they didn't know what it was doing. Couldn't agree more. Even coming to January, Ronan Curtis, I was like, well, hang on a minute. We're signing somebody who's not getting into Port Vale's team. They're about the only team in the league worse than us. But he was fantastic. And it was the underlying data, his chance creation, his expected assists, his big chances created. We're all up there towards the top end of the league. And we brought him in and he got assist after assist after assist. So, yeah, I was wrong.
Graham, I think you want to come in. Just going to show this comment from Superintendent, who says that he was on the same page as Sam. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Graham was perturbed by events and also wanted a change. And obviously, say what you were going to say, but would be interested in your reflections on this too. And just 1 second, you're muted, so I'm going to unmute you.
I did say at the time, I think there was an overwhelming momentum pointing in one direction. Let's be fair. Everybody not close within the club felt a change was coming. And I thought Paul Cook might be the type of manager because he had the experience of League One. But Simon made it clear Tom wasn't going anywhere. But the point I wanted to make about being green, it's a shame that wasn't put out earlier, because it was a game changer for so many people's thinking on Tom Cleverley, how he operated, the prodigious work ethic he had. And it's a bit like, and this would be for Sam, Stephen Schumacher, the same when he did the podcast. He did a podcast where it revealed how much he loved Plymouth, and he went all the different things he associated in Plymouth, and it increased his stature with the fans. The being green was a game changer for sure. It's a pity it didn't come a bit earlier, but as it happened, it didn't matter, because as you saw with his press conferences, as time marched on, he got more confident, more likable. And I actually felt at the Port Vale game, he never went over to the fans, Ryan Lowe style fist pump until quite late in the day. But by the end of the Port Vale game, that last 10 minutes where we had that fantastic unity, the one Argyle unity, if you like, that was the moment I felt there was a perfect alignment with him as head coach, the board, the team management and the fans. And it was a really wonderful sight, given the traumatic, call it traumatic times we had in the season.
And 5 months before that, Graham, the Northampton game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where, Tom Cleverley, football's rubbish. The players weren't fit to wear the shirt. No. Simon Howlett, get out of our club. Yeah. It just shows you, it's a lesson for all of us, isn't it? That football just changes so quickly, and it's that roller coaster ride. Argyle, it's one of the reasons I've loved reporting on Argyle for all the years, because it is a roller coaster ride. It is ups and downs, and we've seen it within the space of 6 months this season, where they went from the depths to almost the real high. It's amazing. It's who needs soap operas on TV when you've got football clubs like Plymouth Argyle to invest your life into?
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different take on this question, and as I said, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think if for instance they put out a video of Cleverley's routine behind the scenes earlier, then it might have gone down like a cup of cold sick. And I think actually.
Not that early, but yeah.
No, sure. But I think at the time, I remember listening to a rival podcast, and I think they were saying that they felt he worked too hard. I think that was a take that they had during that period. I think there was a sense that actually maybe he needs to, not come in at 6 a.m. every day and not kind of overthink the team selection and how we're going to set up for the team we're playing, and just sort of trust instinct a little bit more. And that was criticism that was leveled at him. I think that there can be a bit of a fallacy when looking back on opinions that we have, which do sort of turn out to be wrong in the kind of cosmic sense of, obviously what Sam predicted didn't happen. And yeah, obviously, they can see things that we can't. But I think actually this type of opinion was really premised just on what we all could see on the pitch. I think that criticism and the volume of it, on the one hand, the club stuck to their guns because they retained Cleverley. But on the other hand, a lot changed. Derek Adams coming in was something that I think was pretty unimaginable at the beginning of the season. That fans forum in late November really suggested to me that they got it and they knew how much trouble we were in and how angry the fans were and that things needed to occur. And so I think that, yeah, you can say we were wrong, but in a different sense, maybe we were right and the club listened. I mean, obviously they knew the results were bad as well, but this was only a few weeks after Paul Byrne gave that disastrous interview to the Herald, to Chris, I'm guessing, where he said words to the effect of, I wouldn't call this I wouldn't say I'm concerned, I think was the exact quote, which caused me to have a big meltdown on here. And, they then came out a couple of weeks later and showed they really did get it. Again, there was the Adams appointment, the change of formation. The one that I think also, Sam, bless you, could be somewhat of a more knee-jerk reactor to things than I am. And I think if anything, I'm probably more on the overly naive, happy-clappy side of things sometimes compared to other contributors here. And I think, so I don't necessarily think that I sort of had a knee-jerk reaction. I do seem to recall being very harshly critical of Cleverley, and I think that was wrong, and I would apologise for that, because I think, he wasn't doing a good job at the time, and I'm not going to sort of say that he secretly was doing a good job behind the scenes, and that was okay, because obviously, as Chris was saying, it filtered through to dreadful results on the pitch, but he's clearly a good coach. There's clearly something there. He clearly is adaptable, and I think I was wrong to write him off, and he was also working, within a difficult set of constraints that actually I think make his subsequent turnaround all the more remarkable, rather than obviously focusing exclusively on the extent of the failure early doors, because those constraints didn't just go away. And I want to use that to pivot a little bit to the January transfer window. I think one of you mentioned earlier, maybe Chris, that actually, I don't think it was Chris, but what have you said? I think you used the word flawless to describe the January recruitment. It's interesting to look back on this. Yeah, so Sam, I'll come back to you on this, because obviously, I think Ronan Curtis looms large in discussions of the January recruitment, and obviously has been brilliant. Otherwise, it was Herbie Kane and Wes Harding, and Kane was good, but played about 5 minutes before getting an injury at the end of the season. And Harding, I don't think I think he was a perfectly serviceable player for us, played out of position, and obviously we've had discussions about that on here over the weeks. But I wouldn't say fans would look at him as one who had an incredible impact on the team. So is it sort of a sense that actually when we say the January recruitment was incredible, what we mean is that we probably made our best signing, relative to the amount we spent for him, but it was really concentrated in that one piece of business? Or do you think that I'm not being fair enough on the Kane and Harding business? Are there things I'm overlooking? What was sort of behind
the Herbie Kane, if we hadn't have signed Herbie Kane, we would not have been going into the last game of the season as a playoff place up for grabs. He was critical to the win against Doncaster. He was very important in the draw at Reading, and he was critical to one of the other wins, I think just before he got his injury. I think Blackpool away, we won 4-0. Now, yes, you can argue the margin of victory. Maybe we would have won it without him, but in terms of the building the momentum, building the energy that we had, I think Orient, he came off injured in that game. So Blackpool's the game before that. So yes, he didn't play in that many games, but in the games in which he played, he had a real strong impact. And I don't think we'd be here now going into the Northampton game 2 points off if we hadn't have signed Herbie Kane. So I think maybe you're being a little harsh on that signing. Wes Harding, look, my point on Wes Harding is it's not his fault he was played out of position for 80% of his time. And you know what? It's not even really entirely the club's fault either, because often that was just where we had to have a player. Jack McKenzie was coming back from his first injury, and then he had his second injury, and Galloway was away for a little bit and then injured again. So a lot of time he had to play left back. That being said, I do think one of the only times I had a real moan at Tom Cleverley, after the Christmas was in the Bolton game where he brought off Mackenzie, who was having a good game, for Wes Harding, who I think, well, certainly has a very good long throw. Left back is not his best position at all. But on the very rare occasions he played right back, and I think the even rarer occasion he played centre back, I think literally only the last 20 minutes of one game, he looked very, very assured. So was he amazing most of the time for us? No, he wasn't, because he's not a left back, and he played a left back probably 80% by necessity and maybe 20% by the manager really valuing a long throw highly and just putting him there. But he filled a hole, he filled the gap. And again, I think if we hadn't have signed Wes Harding, who would we have played left back when Galloway and Mackenzie were both unavailable? Would have maybe been Eamon Benarous, who actually, to be fair, I thought Eamon Benarous played quite well when he was at left back in August, but clearly Tom Cleverley didn't fancy him. Benarous himself was very injury prone, so he might have got injured. Again, he filled a gap. And I think also part of the flawless business was, as somebody said in the comments, if we got anything like $1 million for Barley Mumba. Now, rumours of rumours, maybe it's the case that it could have rose to $1 million, but it was a bit less up front. But getting most, if not all, of our money back for Barley Mumba, given how his career seems to have dropped off a cliff, was also good January business. So, yes, John, maybe flawless was a bit too much. I do think maybe adding another goalkeeper might have got us the points we needed to get over the line, or maybe adding another winger might have got us the points we needed to get over the line. But it was a very good January business. I think we brought in 3 players who all hugely helped one way or the other, and we shifted a player for a lot of money who was not massively contributing. So I would reappraise flawless was a little bit generous, but it was a very good window, and probably the best window we've had for quite a while. Certainly the best January window we've had for quite a while, because we've messed up a lot of January windows. Actually.
Yeah.
I
guess,
John, can I just say about Wes Harding? I'm not sure Sam's been very fair, because Tom Cleverley has said how important Wes Harding was in the dressing room. Experience, championship nous, and there were one or two games where he was a bit exposed at left back, but as a utility defender, which effectively I think you can call him, because he can play all along the back 4 and he can play in a 3 at the back as well. It was an excellent signing and brought the character experience that we needed to push on in January. So yeah, I mean, I hope he signs. I mean, he was at Senior Greens.
Oh, well, I hope he signs as well, to be clear. They're great. But a lot of the comments I made there weren't in the context of trying to criticise him. It was more in the context of mitigating where he didn't have such a good game was due to being out of position and like they're being a bit exposed. But in terms of filling the gap where nobody else would, and yes, I did leadership. And to be fair, even though he wasn't always great at left back, he did have some good games from left back. Certainly that Cardiff game, he put in an absolute beauty of a cross for Vimpak's third goal. So yeah, I maybe I don't want those comments to be misconstrued. I was actually caveating that in the context of saying that Wes Harding was actually quite a good signing, and I would be delighted if he comes back, because and again, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I don't think Alex Mitchell's coming back. And I think even if he did, if we're sticking with a 4 at the back, which we probably are, I feel having one of Pleguezuelo, Matthias Ross, or Alex Mitchell not as your first choice centre back, I feel whoever is third choice out of that 3 is probably too good to be third choice. Whereas Wes Harding, as a real utility defender, even if he is third choice, okay, he might not play centre back, but he might be playing right back, he might be playing left back. We might change to a back 3 for the odd game. That, to me, is why Wes Harding would be a good signing if we can get him relatively cheaply.
Yeah, to be clear, my question was really not meant to be a criticism of Harding, particularly in any way. It was just to say that a flawless January window, I think, as a word. I'm not actually picking on you, Sam, on this particular occasion, because I think there was a wide perception that it was a very, very good window, and I was just sort of thought it was worth interrogating a little bit, because I would say that only one of those signings was an unbelievable piece of business, and the other 2 were someone who I think was a very good piece of business when he was fit, which was not a lot of the time, and someone who I would say was solid more so than being spectacular. But you do need players like that in the squad. I guess the other sort of argument against what I have against my skepticism here would be you could include Rules in that batch as well. Obviously, he didn't sign in January because he signed outside of the window on a free transfer, but he was a mid-season signing. Chris, I asked you sort of what the atmosphere around the club was like, that real rock bottom moment in November. When did, you get a sense in your work of the vibe really shifting, not just from we're going down to we'll probably be all right, but more than that? I remember that week in February, at the beginning of which, by the way, Sam was still fretting about us potentially getting stuck back in. And to be fair, I think it was wrong based on how we were playing. It wasn't wrong based on the table, because obviously Exeter did manage to fall into the relegation zone in the end from a higher perch than we actually, I think, were occupying at that time.
It was a momentary wobble, no more.
Yes, and obviously, I also thought you were being ridiculous, given that literally no one managed to beat Lincoln in the end from like November onwards. But yeah, there was then that week where we went to Blackpool and Orient and won 7-1 on aggregate, and then thumped Cardiff at home. I think I'm right in saying those 3 games were back to back. Was that the sort of turning point? Yeah,
that's your answer, John, without a doubt. Because wasn't Blackpool the Saturday after we lost 4-1 to Lincoln and been given a real dose of realisation about what a good League One team was and did? We saw it with our own eyes, didn't we, at Home Park? And that was a bit of a sort of like, oh, crikey, perhaps we've not made the progress we thought we'd made. And to go to Blackpool, I'm sure I remember talking to Drew Savage and people like that before the game in the press box, and we were saying if we lose to Blackpool today, we could be sort of getting sucked right back into it. And then 90 minutes later, we've won 4-0. Then you go from Blackpool on a Saturday to East London on a Tuesday night. Never easy for Argyle to have back-to-back games. Played really well at Leyton Orient. And then topped it off with the Cardiff game. And so, yeah, I think that week, that literally before Blackpool, I think you could have justifiably had concerns about Argyle getting sucked back into the bottom 4, quite justifiably. And then after the Cardiff game, everyone was thinking, well, playoffs are on now, all in 1 week.
Chris, in your experience, have we ever had a better 8 days, results-wise and goals-wise?
Oh, wasn't one of Luggy's seasons, Graham, where we didn't play like Sheffield Wednesday and a Wednesday and got 3, and we got 5 at Port Vale and 6 against Tranmere?
Well,
Sam, can you help me out on this one?
If I'm not going to use for anything, I'm not going to use for anything. It was Saturday, 4th of October, we beat Tranmere 6-0.
Yeah.
We then beat Bristol City in the LDV Vans Trophy, as it was.
That was 4, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then it was the Saturday, the 11th of October, Tranmere was, sorry. John's birthday, in fact.
My 11th birthday.
Yeah.
I actually had a choice that day between going to watch Argyle or going and having a surfing lesson at Bantham, and chose the latter, and stood on a weaver fish, which really hurt.
Well, that'll teach you, won't it? And then the Saturday was Port Vale, the 5-1. My fun little story is that I was one of the many Argyle fans caught in the motorway that day, and when I came into the ground, we were already 4-1 up. And then, as Chris then said, then it was Wednesday, the 3-1 win. So in the space of 11 days, 6-0, 4-0, 5-1, 3-1. And that's,
I think that might have beaten it, but it was quite close, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Graham's question was about 8 days, rather than 11. So,
Sam, did you not see the David Frio goal then?
No, that's what I did see. That was the fifth one.
I'd say that's one of my favourite all-time Argyle goals. That was.
Well, it was back in the day, and this shows, the technology now. But everyone now has goals apps and screens they can get up on their phone and all the rest of it. My dad, who was going, I was only 10 at the time. I was on the travel club. My dad rung my mum, who put the mobile phone up to Radio Devon with yourself actually, and of course.
I think it might be me and Sparksy,
yeah, with you and Sparksy, and hearing your voices transmitted through the mobile phone onto the travel club, and crawling through traffic approaching Burslem, and the travel club coach going crazy at 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, and then Port Vale just got one back to 4-1 as we were approaching the club car park, and then we came in at 4-1, and we did see the Frio goal,
Amazing. And Chris, did you, from your personal view, I know it's obviously not your sort of business to make predictions, but did you actually think that we would do it and get over the line?
Get into the playoffs?
Yeah.
I think I was probably always more on the cautious side or not cautious. I wasn't convinced, no, because too much had to go right even when Argyle got on that good run, even after beating Cardiff, even going into March, there was no margin for error, was there? I mean, we went to Reading and played a really good game that day, came from behind twice. In lots of ways, it was a good performance and a good game, but that was 2 points dropped. Ordinarily, that would have been a good result. Bradford, another good example, where you go to Bradford and you draw 1-1 against a team fourth and have got the second best home record. That's a good result. But it always felt like we were just a little bit we were just a point or two too far away for me to get really, yeah, we're definitely going to do this. And the Bolton and the Exeter games, missed opportunities. We got close, but it always was just that fraction too far, I felt. But, I wasn't going to stop people from,
there was,
the people were perfectly entitled to say we're definitely going to get in the playoffs because the form was so good, but there was no margin for error or very little margin.
To be fair, Chris, Tom's points prediction to get in the playoffs kept going up, didn't it? Went up 3 points in the end.
It's funny you mentioned that, Graham, but after the game against Northampton, Tom did his post-match interview with Argyle TV, which he does first. And then he comes across and does the interview with me and whoever the Radio Devon reporter is of the day. And that was Drew Savage that day. And when Tom came across to us and before we started recording, we were just sort of commiserating. And he said, I thought 73 was going to be enough. And it was like...
Yeah, well, they were sort of spelling out.
He just felt that it just came out. It was instinctive. We weren't recording. It wasn't a comment for anything in particular, but he clearly got it in his mind that 73 was going to do it.
But he was 7 minutes out. That's all. 7 minutes, wasn't it?
And after the Bolton game, I think you could see them kind of thinking, well, we can have one game where we slip up and only get a point when we should win, which was the Exeter one. And then they're probably thinking, well, we'll go to Bradford and get a point, and that'll be a fine result, and then we'll win. We'll have to win, all but one of the other games. And that is how it panned out. I mean, I actually predicted, and while we're doing incorrect prediction, atonement. I think I can't remember after which game this was. Maybe the Huddersfield one. I actually said we would finish in the playoffs, but not sixth. We would finish fourth or fifth. And I don't think I was miles off being wrong. I actually wasn't in the end.
Did you not say after the Cardiff game? I thought maybe.
It was the Cardiff game, John.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so my take, and it always was, and this was even including after Stockport and Lincoln when I was getting a little bit wobbly again, like Chris said. My take was always that it was possible, and I think what I said after Stockport and what I think I possibly even still said after Lincoln was, both outcomes are still in play. We could go down, but we could come top six as well. Now, then we had the 3 wins in a row, which that took relegation out of the equation completely. And then there was the Rotherham game where 14 players decided to be injured all at once. And I thought, right, we've had our fun now. We've got all these injuries. We're not going to go down, but we're not going to make the top 6 either. We just got too many injuries. We're going to just have a horrible run of form with all these injuries. And then we won Doncaster. We won Wigan, we drew at Reading, and we beat Stevenage. And we go, oh my goodness, it's right back on. So pretty much for almost...
And beat Huddersfield, which I think was probably the high point of the season.
Yeah. I thought...
Not just to be clear, not the high point not the high point as an individual game necessarily, but that was the sort of moment where, especially heading into what turned out to be an international break, that was the moment where it felt on.
What I was just about to say was, for many months, I thought we could do it. In terms of my prediction being whether or not we will do it, I predicted we would for precisely 13 days, which was the time between Huddersfield and Bolton. After we then lost to Bolton, I always was then erring on the side of, of course we still might do, but we've left ourselves a bit too much to do. And that 13 days between Huddersfield and Bolton was the only time I truly believe we would do it. And then we lost to Bolton, and that kind of tipped me back the other side of the line. But
Didn't you believe for 16 minutes on the last of the season we were going to do it?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, I was a shaking wreck looking at my phone and constantly refreshing it. I would not have believed
and then you went to the football. It's I think it just goes to show that I think we discovered in that title season, you have to be relentless to win the title. Certainly you did that year. Lincoln actually were relentless this year and actually didn't necessarily have to be, and Cardiff weren't so much and still went up in second place. But yeah, I think it just goes to show, Graham, surely that you can't give yourself that much of a handicap and expect to get anywhere. Yeah, and on that note, then we had this comment coming in from Gaza Brown High earlier in the program. It's been a very poor League One this year, which makes it even more disappointing. We didn't get promoted. Top 6 budget and finishing 8th is an underperformance. We have had this debate in our group chat, as to whether this season reflects sort of par or an underperformance or potentially an overperformance. I don't think anyone in the group chat, to be clear, is happy that we didn't get into the playoffs or bounce back to the championship at the first time of asking. At the same time, there are those who are more on the negative side who would agree with Gaza that, if you actually zoom out and sort of take out the pattern in which the results fell, the actual overall outcome has been not what we would have necessarily expected, coming down as a relegated club from the championship. There are those, and I would count myself among them, who think you can't ignore the way in which the results fell, and that actually being probably the second best team in the league for months, while it doesn't wipe away the kind of stain of the end of last year, is certainly, it has to be taken into account. Certainly, if we had finished 8th and it had been the case that we had been the best team in the league for the first 4 or 5 months of the season and then fallen off a cliff, I think we'd be having a very, very different conversation in terms of tenor this evening. So, yeah, Graham, I'll come to you
mean
first.
Like Huddersfield?
Yes, well, yeah, kind of, although they were never really quite that good, were they?
Just like last season, the same.
Last season, yeah.
Both seasons.
Yeah. This season, I think they were a bit more hit and miss throughout, I would say. But yeah, where do you stand on that debate?
Well, I think Paul Byrne confirmed actually we had the 7th highest budget, and I'm not a strong believer in. There is a correlation between wage budget and performance, inevitably. But Lincoln, Chris, were they 14th or 17th highest budget or something like that?
14th rings a bell with me.
And Stevenage was 17th. So it tends to slightly disprove the theory. So I think I would say we performed in line with our wage budget expectation. And if we were turned out to be 7th, that's outside the playoffs, and that's where we finished. But as in our 101 season, where I think we had the 14th highest budget, you have to outperform it. And if you outperform it, then you've got a good chance of going up. And that's what we're going to do next year.
Chris, what's your take on it?
I think I agree with Graham that there is some balance between budget and performance, but we've all seen loads of examples over the years in football, Leicester winning the Premier League, all those sort of things, that you don't have to have the biggest budget. It's what you get out of players. I think you have to take into account the fact that there was I know this is going back over old ground, but there was so much change last summer. Literally everything changed at the football club. The struggle shouldn't have lasted as long as they did, but it was almost inevitable that they would get off to a slow start. You don't throw 16 people in a dressing room together and immediately hit it off, one as people, as characters and people and workmates and colleagues, and then being on the same wavelength on the football pitch. Now, budget doesn't take account of that. Budget is hard and fast. This is the money we've spent, but it doesn't allow for the fact that people need time to settle in. A lot of them came down from London and various places. You've got to settle into a new environment. You've got to settle in with new teammates and work colleagues. You've got to settle into your new boss, and what does your new boss want from you? And so budget is a guide to what you should be doing, but it's bigger than that. It's broader than that. And so I get the point about 8th being underperformance. We all feel that Plymouth Argyle should be better than 8th in League One, I think. But from the position we were in, and was some of that, a lot of that of the club's own making, yeah, you could argue that for sure. But I think from where we were at the start of the season to where we finished it, I think you have to say that was a decent season. Not a brilliant season, not as good as we would have hoped season, but it was a decent season. And I think the point you made, John, is that if we'd started like we finished and ended like we started, then it would be very, very different. but at least we can get to the end of the season, see positives, see building blocks, see a system, see a style of play. We've got a manager who's survived a season or got through a full season for the first time since Shuey did in 22-23. So there's building blocks in place. But I do get the underperformance. I do get that, because Argyle should be doing better than 8th. But they were at a very, very low base in November time.
Sam, I'm just quickly, I will come to you. I just wanted to blow your trumpet for you for a second, because me, Sam, and 2 other individuals do 1 to 24 predictions for the Premier League down through League 2. I would say that I actually won this year in terms of we total it up in terms of the place differential between where a team was predicted and where they came. Usually I don't win, so I just want to put out there that I did. But Sam, I think for the first time, I don't think anyone has ever from our group got Argyle right, spot on, and you did. You said they would finish 8th, so you deserve credit for that. And I just want to ask you how you kind of reflect on that prediction, because I'm sure you would not have predicted the manner in which it came about. So how do you sort of assess that? And again, that'll be the final word on the season just gone.
Yeah, and even before I knew you and the other individuals, before Facebook Messenger group chats were even a thing, as my dad, who's watching in the comments, will quantify, I always did a 1 to 24 prediction of, at the very least, the league Argyle we're in, if not all the leagues. And I'm pretty sure in saying that this is the first ever time in my 25 years, nearly 24 years of going, that I have predicted Argyle's position spot on. I've got very close a couple of times. There have also been some times where I've got horrifically wrong, like the year we went down to Derek Adams. I predicted us to come second, probably being the highlight of that one. But this was the first ever year I got our position spot on. And as you say, certainly the manner of it, I actually would not have predicted. I kind of predicted maybe a light version of it, because I did think we'd start badly. I kind of maybe could see a world where we were sort of mid-table in October, November, and just sort of edged up towards the top 6 and maybe dipped in and out of it a little bit. So I kind of maybe predicted a very sort of diet version of the season, but I certainly didn't predict the extreme irregularity. Like we said, umpteen times now, 24th in late November, 21st in early January, to then come 8th is just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. On the underachievement question, I absolutely think you've got to ask that question 2 ways. Has Tom Cleverley underachieved? Is question number 1, and have the club underachieved as a collective? I think the answer to question number 1, has Tom Cleverley underachieved, is absolutely a big fact. No, if anything, I think he's overachieved, because Simon Hallett himself did say at the fan forum in December, he didn't quite say it so bluntly as this, but it was very much paraphrased of, we've signed a mid-table squad on a top 6 budget and we're very sorry for that. Or not exactly that, but very much the undertone was, we've wasted our budget. So if we did sign a mid-table squad on a top 6 budget, you have to say Tom Cleverley's done very well to get that squad as high as 8th. That's actually an overachievement. So has Tom Cleverley underachieved? No, I think if anything, he's slightly overachieved. Has the club as an overall body underachieved? I would say yes, slightly. Mitigations of the way we've ended is positive stuff to take going into next season, particularly if we can keep the director of football, the head coach, and most of the squad together. I think we can. Tollai's gone. I think we can probably all accept that. He'll be off, I would say, pretty much certainly. But if we can keep most of the rest together, certainly if we can tie Vim Peppel down, that would be wonderful. Absolutely, there's positives to take going forward. But the club overall, I think, has slightly underachieved. Just in the sense of, there was a lot of talk that if we get relegated, we're going to be one of the big boys. We're going to be fighting to come straight back up. And look, I know that doesn't mean, HMS win the league or whatever, but I think the very minimum anyone would have hoped for is to at least get into the playoffs. And the fact we've not done that is probably on a wider structural level, a bit of a failure. But positives to take, like I say, I just hope that we don't get this squad picked apart too much. Like that, I accept that Tollai is very likely to go. I've heard a few little rumours of interest in others. Peppel, interest in him. Peter O'Rourke reported interest in Aseni. We will talk more about him later. Don't worry. We have a very important bit of AOB coming up on Owen Aseni. Maybe Matthias Ross.
Any business. So I'm going to cut you off here because because we are going to talk about all this in a minute, so I don't want you to get too in your stride on it. I actually will give myself the final word on this segment. I lied. I think
John, sorry, there was just one point that I think Joe was going to ask you about our disciplinary record.
Yes, I forgot to talk about that. We had a comment coming in from Pasotti. Graham, thank you very much for highlighting that, which I have mislaid. But so sorry to the person who sent that in.
Basically is why we had so many bookings. And in fact, I think we're equal to, I thought we were top. We're not. We're equal top with Bradford, 117 bookings. 5 red cards. So if you do points for red cards and points for bookings, we're top of the disciplinary table. Plus, Tom got sent off twice, I think. Was it twice? Himself and a few other yellow cards. So why? Why did we have
Sorinola and Ibrahim were about half of them between the two of them, weren't they? Sorinola and Ibrahim were about half of those between the two of them.
Sorinola was 13, I think.
Yeah.
So,
did he play 13 games?
I think he got booked pretty much every time he played, or at least that's
but we talk about correlations. When I read through the top teams, it's Argyle, Bradford, Lincoln, Barnsley, Orient, Rotherham, Stevenage. And they're all probably the top teams in terms of physicality and, should we say, robust style in the way that they played. So there is a correlation. And we developed a robust style towards the second half of the season. We, from having a lack of physicality first half, we addressed it and we were bang on second half. But I was just going to ask, can you think of any reason why?
It's interesting because I don't think we were a dirty side, certainly compared to some others that you saw us play. And I also, I think actually my criticism of Argyle going back several years, the Muslich era possibly exempted from this, is that we were too nice, if anything. I think certainly early on in the season, when things were going wrong, I think they were just very poor individual judgment calls from a lot of players that just seemed to happen a lot. And I think in the second half of the season, we were playing with a bit more physicality. So I guess that would be my take on it. I don't think I really have a sort of an overarching explanation. Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, John. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself there.
Okay.
I think when the team was struggling, the players didn't have the experience to fall back on, and they didn't have the characters around them. They didn't have a Joe Walls or a Joe Edwards, and so a little bit of the discipline went. I mean, Bradley Ibrahim, I think, had about 5 yellow cards in the first 6 games, wasn't it? Something like that. And that wasn't because he's a bad player or a bad person or whatever, but it was just things were a little bit out of Argyle's control. The players didn't have senior pros experience to call on. And I think we picked up quite a lot of yellow cards very early on. I don't think Argyle were a dirty team. I think there was quite a few tactical fouls, definitely. And I think maybe in the second half of the season, we got more streetwise in League One, as we've touched on in other aspects. And so, I think a combination of a bit of naivety, inexperience early on in the season, a little bit more sort of ruthless streetwise in the second half, combination of things. Tom Cleverley did many good things. I think having your manager sent off twice isn't a good look when you're trying to instill discipline into players when you're struggling to keep discipline yourself. I got completely. Tom felt that a lot of refereeing decisions were going against Argyle, and he was doing his bit to stand up for his players and almost like take one for the team by letting go at the referees. So I sort of understood that argument, but I still don't think when Tom had 2 reds and 3-4 yellow cards, that it's difficult then to have the leader has to lead, don't they, and set the example. So I think it was multitude of things, but we all saw lots of Argyle games. That wasn't a dirty, ill-disciplined team through the season. I think they were just a bit naive at the start and got a little bit more streetwise, hence bookings in the second half.
Yeah, and the 3 red cards that I can remember off the top of my head that we had were kind of a case in point here. That there's not necessarily one overarching explanation for all of it. I mean, the Edwards one was a naughty tackle at Luton, but I think was a little bit borderline. I don't think it's the worst challenge you've ever seen, even if you do think it was a red. You then had, obviously, Talai get sent off for, an off-the-ball incident, which was just a complete head loss and lack of discipline. And then Hazard gets sent off at the end of the season for something that's not dirty in any way. It's just a terrible piece of goalkeeping from him.
Rovers in the cup after a minute and a half as well.
Yeah.
Yes, and that one. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, hopefully that has answered the question that came in from Pasotti, and thanks, Graham, for reminding me of that. I just wanted to have the final word on the season as a whole before we say goodbye to Chris, and maybe just get on to a couple of things with the remaining 3 of us. It sounds strange because obviously we got 101 points the last time we were in this league, but I think this might be my favourite season since I started supporting Argyle, and I think that part of that is because I mostly go to away games, and seeing us score so many goals on the road and ending up with a personal record of 7 wins from 10 away games. I mean, that's just unheard of. Actually, in the 101 season, I calculated that my personal away points per game that I'd witnessed was less than 1 until we went to Port Vale on the final day. and that just tipped it over, which is pretty shocking when you consider that we got 101 points. But I think also I just think that this team, I remember saying in our group chats before, when things were really at the end of the year, I said, even including Tolai, and with probably the only exception being Joe Edwards because of his sort of longevity with the club and legend status, I wouldn't care if any of these players left. I'd be very happy to see the back of them. I really hate this team, not getting any joy out of it. It's awful. To fall in love with a team of pretty much all new players and sort of start an era and go from that appalling, angry low to just some of the most amazing highs has been unbelievably cathartic. And I just think it's why I love football. Obviously where we finished up wasn't what we hoped for, but God, it was exciting and interesting and fun. So I think it's been a really memorable one. And obviously next season, hopefully we can write some new memories that end up a little bit better. But I think it was just a great reminder that it's not always necessarily about where you end up, but it's the real memories of the goals that you score along the way. Chris, we're going to wrap up our review of the season there. We will, as I mentioned, discuss a few more things. You're gonna take your leave. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we say goodbye?
Well, it's been good to spend time talking with you guys, reflecting on the season. I agree with you, John. I've enjoyed this season, and I've had plenty reporting on Argyle over the years. I think in time, and I could be wrong here, but it feels like everyone these days does jump to conclusions very quickly, and I can think back to sort of the late 1990s, and I don't want to sound like the old git in the corner sort of thing.
You're not the only one, Chris. Don't worry.
But Argyle had some horrendous seasons, in the Dan McCauley era and things like that. And if that sort of thing had happened now, that happened back in the late 1990s, Graham,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Twitter would have exploded, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely exploded. Yeah. And I do feel as time's gone by, we are all guilty of perhaps we have to have an opinion almost immediately. These players are brilliant. These players are rubbish. And I think maybe this season, if it's taught us anything, it's let's look at it at a slightly bigger picture. Things are never going to go exactly how you want them. There are going to be ups and downs. With Plymouth Argyle, we're not Manchester City. We're not, millions and millions of pounds. Isn't it best to give people a little bit of a chance? Give a new head coach a bit of a chance. Give some players who clearly at the start of the season were not experienced enough, not streetwise enough, were lacking in confidence. Give them a bit of time to grow. I know it's a results business, and the fans pay their money. They're perfectly entitled to say what they want, have the opinions what they want. But hasn't this season proved to us all that just by having a bit of patience, you can find stability, a bit of stability. And then with stability, you can build confidence. And then you can start moving forward. Whereas the constant churn, always going round and round in circles, is not going to get you where you want to go. So, yeah, I agree with you, John. I enjoyed this season. I enjoyed going to away games and seeing Argyle win. There was one
and expecting
spell,
us to win by the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, there was one spell where, apart from winning a game at Torquay, Argyle went 2 years without winning a game outside of Devon. So to see Argyle get 12 away league wins in a season, and most of those came from December onwards. I mean, incredible. So, yeah, I think that Argyle should be higher than 8th in League One. I think they're capable of doing better next season, but I think from all the mess that they got themselves into through their own fault and for other reasons, I think this season was a good rebuild, stabilise, and then hopefully good decisions can be made, good recruitment can be made, budget can be well spent, and then if we have this conversation this time next year, hopefully we'll be very happy.
But Chris, don't you think, sorry, John, don't you think we're a bit of a crossroads with impending investment and things might change?
That can change the ball game completely. What I've just described, Graham,
not necessarily, I mean, positively and
yeah,
well, hopefully not negatively, but
yeah,
we know what happened when there was change after the Stapleton era, and we've got to be wary. But we're at a crossroads, and the summer's going to be interesting, not just in terms of recruitment, but the evolution of the offers for the club that seem to be emerging. So
isn't this where Argyle historically have always been a sort of top end third division team, and Argyle have proved that they're capable of getting into the second division, and we've had spells where we've been in the fourth division, if you excuse the old terminology there. So I would agree, Graham. Yeah, this is where almost feels like where Argyle's natural level has been over the years, certainly in my time reporting on them. And so can they push upwards and make a better job of sustaining that? Well, hopefully we won't need to worry about it going down. But yeah, I agree. And any sort of new investment, takeovers, ownership changes, then that can change the ball game very significantly, can't it?
And Graham, I'm going to ask you about the investment in a little moment, but I know we need to say goodbye to Chris. Darren had asked what was our best moment of the season. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be doing an awards podcast next week, so I think we will get into that then. But Stevie R did ask specifically, Chris, what's your highlight of the season? And given that you're joining us now, I just will, if it's okay, ask you very, very quickly and put you on the spot before we let you go.
There were several candidates, weren't there? Because there was plenty of highlights. I think beating Cardiff 5-2 at home park that day. I mean, that was not by chance that day. That was Argyle really clicking. We knew we were playing against a top-end League One side, and that wasn't a 5-2 that flattered Argyle, was it? So that was a good day. I enjoyed that one. But there was, fortunately, thanks to the second half of the season, there were a number of highlights.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks so much. We have had several comments about your Crystal Palace fandom, so I will just end with this one. Do you think Palace will win the Europa Conference League? And someone asked earlier, are you going?
I don't know if I'll be able to get a ticket, but I'm seriously considering going and just joining up with some fellow Palace fans and seeing what happens. But it's a funny old season. Palace getting to a European final. I never thought I'd see that, that's for sure.
And obviously, all the best as well for Crystal Palace's most important remaining game of the season, denying Arsenal the title on the final day. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great.
Thanks very much for inviting us, guys. Really appreciate it. See you soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're still here. Sam has got bigger, as you can see. And we will, we'll do another sort of 20, 25 minutes. I don't want to drag on too much. I know it's been a long show with obviously lots to discuss, but there is some sort of forward-facing and current news to dissect since we last came to you after the Northampton game last week. And I have to say that feels like a lifetime ago, even though it was a week, which is completely ridiculous. I think the biggest news out of the club is that the retained list came out this week. And essentially the headlines are Connor Hazard, Joe Edwards and Joe Rawls have been offered new contracts. Patterson, Baker, Benarous, Ashby, Hammond, Galloway, Matthews, Hatch, Ogbeta, and Callum Wright released. And then obviously everyone else is either staying or if they were a lone player going. That's obviously not getting into some of the other youth players who were sadly let go. Sure as happens at this time of year. A couple of surprises on there. I think for me, one of them was finding out that Soranola was still in contract. I think there'd been some discussion about whether he might be out, and obviously he has been at the club for quite a while now. So, but yeah, I'm sure he now presumably must be entering the last year of his deal. Ashby Hammond, I actually expected to be retained or offered a deal because I felt that after the difficulty we had in signing him last summer, the club would be very wary of potentially losing two goalkeepers and having to replace them both. Obviously, we don't know if Hazard will sign a new deal, but he was released. Yeah, Graham, what were your sort of reflections? And I should just say quickly as well, Brendan Galloway released. What an amazing servant he's been for the club. And I think it was right that the official social media accounts sort of singled him out, given his long service and time as a promotion winner. Maybe we'll get into discussing him in a moment. But yeah, what were your sort of overall
I think it was in line with expectations. It was well trailed that both the two Joes would be offered contracts. There's an expectation that Connor would be as well. I'm with you actually on Luca. I thought as a second string keeper that played 21 games, that's quite a bit of experience to retain for the forthcoming season. And I thought he got better as the season went on. Yes, he made some howlers which are well documented, but generally toward the second half of the season, I think the Lincoln game was the last real mistake he made, I think, from memory. So I personally, I would have offered him a contract as a number two keeper and been happy to keep him, because I think there aren't going to be many second string keepers that have played 21 league games in League One.
Yeah, I'm afraid for me, too many mistakes. So I probably do agree with the decision to let him go. Yeah, I think
you say that, John. I mean, there was a table of the mistakes that the Premiership keepers make.
And I think some of them are rubbish as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. So we're talking about 7 mistakes in the season, and I don't think Luke has made that many. But right, he's played half a season, to be fair.
I think there might be a difference of opinion on some of them. I mean, Renzik97 saying he made 2 mistakes in one half. I think some of these you can get into whether it was so much his fault or not. I think I remember having a disagreement with you after the Stockport game about the extent to which their winning goal was his fault, which maybe was a bit harsh from me looking back. But yeah, Sam, what were your thoughts? I mean, for me, I think that we've probably got the released batch of players about right, with the exception that I hope we are offering some sort of support to Brendan Galloway. Obviously, given that he has quite a bad injury, that there was some discussion of. I think Cleverley actually said, they were going to help him with that, and then they would reassess. I mean, the communications about his departure seem very final, so I don't expect to see him in an Argyle shirt again. But yeah, what are your thoughts about the released crop?
With the exception of. I thought maybe offer Galloway like a 6-month deal on like very low pro wages to support the rehabilitation. That notwithstanding, maybe I could have gone either way on some of the youngsters who I've not really seen enough play to form a firm judgment. That you like Joe Hatch and Jack Matthews, with the exception of Galloway, and like I say, maybe the youngsters I can't really comment. It is the exact list that I would have actually made. Look, Lucas Hammond, he has improved over a season, but still for me too many. I think Reading was probably his last mistake actually, but I wouldn't have been fuming if he'd been offered one as a backup, because I do think he did improve. But I think the right decision was made, and like I say, for me, I would have still offered Connor one. I think it's probably me and Tom Cleverley are maybe the only 2 men in Plymouth who would have done, but I still think that Connor Hazard has proven enough over his 3 years that another 1 or 2 would be justified. And Joe Edwards and Joe Rawls, they were pretty much no-brainers. Soranola did surprise, because that means because we've certainly not offered him a new extended contract since then. So that means that when we signed him in January 2024, we would have offered him a 3.5-year contract, or at the very least, it would have been a contract which would have, triggered to a 3rd year if a certain number of appearances were met, which I probably what it was. But He is,
or a certain number of bookings, possibly.
Yeah, well, yes, maybe. But that seemed what it was. Callum Wright and Ogbeta, again, they were loaned out. They were effectively released a year ago because they were on a year-long loan, but they've only got a year left on their contract. Jamie Patterson, for all I do think he showed some good moments in central midfield when he did play there in the absence of Herbie Kane, just didn't show nearly enough over a season to justify the very high wages we were paying him. And clearly we just took the first opportunity we could to get his wages off the wage bill. Eamon Benarous, for me, he had very, very bad game at home to Reading on Boxing Day, but that game was literally the last I saw of him. But before that game, Eamon Benarous, I think he never really played badly when he played. I would have certainly given him a few more minutes over the season, maybe some at left back, maybe some in CM. So it was a bit of an odd one, but you got to read between the lines of it when a player's not kicked the ball in anger since Boxing Day. He's going to get released as well. So.
Well, to be fair, we released Eamon Benarous once, so
we did.
Effectively. So maybe he's not done. Graham, where do you stand on the Connor Hazard debate? I mean, Sean Stock in the comments says Hazard back at the best. Just quickly, because I think Sam and I disagree on this. I think, and it's not necessarily I think he's a bad goalkeeper, but I'd sort of be more open than in some of my debates with Sam privately to offering him a new contract. I think that maybe I've indicated, but. I do think he's been not at his best for us. And I also think that goalkeeper is a much more kind of tactical position than it used to be in this day and age. And I think for a Muslich team, Hazard being someone who's kind of quite anchored on his line and gets a bit flighty when he has to come off it is probably a good goalkeeper as a last line of defence with two towering centre-backs in front of him. I think that Port Vale incident to me kind of epitomised that he looks uncomfortable in this Cleverley side. And I just wondered if, again, not necessarily it's a reflection on him. And I think even if he does turn down a new deal with us, he might well, go on to a better club, whether to be number one or number two. But yeah, maybe there is someone we could get who just is a bit more front-footed in that position. I don't know if he would be available to us, but Sam Tickle at Wigan, when we played them, I thought was excellent. He made a terrible mistake for one of our goals, but in terms of actually getting the ball forward, he was always forward-thinking. He's a goalkeeper who seems to play on the edge of his own box more so than Hazard does, certainly. So I think there are reasons to suggest that you might want to try and start again in that position rather than kind of continue with this inheritance that Cleverley's had. Where do you stand on
Well,
that?
I think we forget he's a Northern Ireland international and he hasn't quite cemented his place in the side as the number one choice. So will he have a better opportunity of getting that number one spot if he went to, say, a Premiership club in Scotland, say, or perhaps even a club in Europe? I don't know. I feel a bit barley mumberish about him, that it's time that we part on good terms. That's how I feel. Because I don't actually think he suits the style of play that we're going to play, which is why I'm more of an advocate of Luca, because Luca can play the balls that determine the way we play higher up the pitch. He's got a much better flighty kick. He's more precise with his kicking. And Connor isn't. He's much more an up in the air and down rather than flighty. If you remember the Exeter keeper in the wind, in that terrible windy day, he managed to play with the wind far better than Connor Hazard did. So if he signs, he signs. I hope this time we have two keepers competing for the number one spot, because if I was to criticise Tom early doors, it would be that he made Connor number one and made that decidedly. So compared to, say, when Luggy was in the same position with keepers, we've had two good keepers before and they've sort of spurred each other on without necessarily being the definite number one. So I hope if we are going to sign Connor that we sign somebody of equal ability and they compete for the number one spot.
Yeah. Dan, we had quite a lot of questions about this last week, I think. It wasn't really the right time to get into it, so I will just offer you an opportunity now before we move on. What can or should the club do about Michael Baidoo? JB Janabay asked. This was a topic of conversation at the recent fans forum. Obviously, Baidoo has been away on loan, and I think he's been injured for quite a lot of that time this season in Qatar. Still contracted with us. I think there was a very clear sense from Paul Byrne that he will be a part of the squad or he will be moved on. There's not going to be a kind of favourable paying up his contract and parting of ways. But then Tom Cleverley, I think, told Chris in that recent interview that he didn't anticipate that he would have any role at the club, that there wasn't really a lot of enthusiasm for Baidoo to come back. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, if you want to hear the answer the club are trying to project to the world, listen to Paul Byrne. If you want to hear the truth of it, listen to Tom Cleverley, because he just opens his mouth and the truth comes out. So I think probably the latter one is maybe the more truthful assessment, if I'm honest. And to be clear, that's not derogatory to Paul Byrne at all. He's doing his job as CEO. I'm just really referring to Tom Cleverley has a knack of just speaking completely honestly, maybe even a little too honestly at times. Okay, so Baidoo, he's under contract next season and the season after, and some rumours it might even be the season after that. He signed a deal that was at least for 3.5 years, may even have been 4.5 years. It's the rumour that's going around, but he's under contract for at least 2 more years. Last year, we actually got quite lucky in that the club in Qatar, who I cannot ever remember the name of, maybe someone will put it in the comments, basically paid a loan fee and covered 100% of his wages. Are we going to be in a position this year where a club pays a loan fee and covers 100% of his wages? Probably not, because he didn't exactly... Salal, thank you, Superintendent, for that in the comments, because he didn't exactly do great at Salal. Now, that being said, it's so tough to follow the Qatari league, but it's not there's no reliable English language coverage of it. But he didn't do terribly there either. He had an injury, quite a bad injury midway through the season. I think then he came back and was quite a regular fixture and got a couple of assists. So, maybe he might go back there, or maybe he might go, somewhere else in that part of the world. Obviously, there's all sorts of stuff happening in that part of the world at the minute, which is far beyond our remit as a podcast. That might complicate things, but maybe he might go back to that part of the world. Maybe he might go back to Sweden, which is where he has a track record of being very good. To be clear, if we can get someone to pay a fee for him and take on 100% of his wages, like happened this year, absolutely snap the hand off. Even if we can find someone who's not going to pay a fee for him, will take on, 90% of his wages, snap the hand off. I think realistically, it's going to be a situation whereby, even if we get 75% of his wages and no loan fee, we would take it, just because it's kind of a sunk cost fallacy at this point. Is there a scenario whereby he comes back for pre-season and gets reintegrated into the team? I don't think it's at all likely. I didn't think it was likely anyway, and I think it was even less likely after listening to Tom Cleverley's comments. But, stranger things have happened in football.
Quite a lot of them this season.
Quite a lot of them
involving us, so yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's possible. I think what's probably more likely is we'll find someone to take him out on loan for X, Y, Z% of his wage. Or if that doesn't happen, we could offer him a contract settlement where we're going to say, right, we're going to pay you 4 months' wages up front to clear off, basically. We'll see.
As a negotiator, do you think he would accept that as a deal, being honest?
No, probably not. I think he would probably negotiate.
I mean, I could recommend you for our recruitment team on that basis.
No, yeah, that was maybe more my perception of Argyle's starting offer rather than the offer he would actually accept. So, yeah, we'll have to see about that. But it wouldn't shock me if there was a settlement whereby Argyle pay, however many months' worth of his wages just to get him off the books, or we loan him out. Because I think the scenario whereby a club come in and actually bid for him is optimistic based on his track record over the past 18 months. But maybe if we go back to Elfsborg, or however you say it, and what his former club Elfsborg, and say, right, if you pay us 80% of his wages and no loan fee, have him on a year-long loan, or even a half-season-long loan to the end of the Swedish season, they might take that.
Graham, in light of Sam's previous comment, what's your opinion of Trump's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz? Is that counterproductive? No, obviously not asking about that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a fair point, because what is the football league in Qatar going to be like when, economically they're not going to be in the same position as they have been? I mean, I think we've got to write off the fee and see if we can get somebody take him off our books and go pay him wages.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think it is. I mean, it would be a generational comeback story if you were to be seen again in an Argyle shirt doing good things. But yeah, anything's possible. Graham, I'll come back to you. You started to talk earlier about the possibility of investment. I don't want to spend too long on this just because we don't actually know anything super for sure. But there was a intrepid piece of Woodward and Bernstein-esque investigative journalism on Passotti this week, tracking down some interesting developments, which some of our online viewers, although they are online, I guess, by watching us, might not be aware of. Do you want to talk about that?
Great credit to Ian Delar or Posty or PL2 3DQ because he's obviously been monitoring Charlie Methven on Company's House, and lo and behold, back in March, Hitchin Holdings Limited was set up in Company's House with two directors, Eric Barmack, who is the Netflix I think he's a former executive, or might still be an executive, and his wife's Snapchat as well, I think. And he was a previous person that tried to invest in Motherwell, but when you actually scratch the surface, it was a just under £2 million offer over 6 years, which doesn't strike you as being game-changing, let's be fair. And then there's a chap called Mas Gerbert Schouten, I think that's how you pronounce it, who at one time back in 2009 was the owner of Vitesse Arnhem, and then I think he suffered in the financial crash of that time and sold the club to a Russian, and within a few years Vitesse Arnhem disappeared, never to be seen again. So, but he's back. He's expressed an interest to buy or get involved in English Football Club. Remarkably, it appears he's a viewer of the Green and White podcast and reads Argyle Life. So if you're watching, hi, welcome.
She's obviously got terrible judgment and should steer well away.
I don't know. Oh, you could say good taste. I don't know. But I mean, what off air, Chris did indicate Charlie Methven has been well involved. I'm aware he's been at the club 3 times since February. He is a fixer, a sorter out, a bringing to the table type. And that appears to be what's happening. So how or what? I mean, the interesting thing is that Hitchin Holdings Limited is a company registered at his pub in High Wycombe, which sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Let's be fair. And it's not a company with any money in it. It's a special purpose vehicle designed to invest in a football club. So something's happening. And Simon, I mean, clearly with the picture on Greens on the screen of Mr. Barmack being one end and Mr. Schouten being at the other end, and then I think it was 3 or even 4 people in between who variously were American billionaires, and nobody, I think even the best face recognition toolkit couldn't pick up who they were, so they could just be.
I think one of them could plausibly have been John McAvoy, which is not, but kind of
the one with the scarf, but it wasn't convincing, was it? I mean, if you're in a lineup,
I would say
if you're doing a lineup to say pick the man out, it wouldn't have been a reliable choice. But the good news is we've got interest. It's genuine interest, and Mr. Schouten posted the home park and spoke. I haven't seen his words on home park, but what a game! If you are looking to invest in a football club, what a game to be at, to be entranced by what Argyle can offer.
We're absolutely not. We're not going to get onto a discussion of geopolitics. We're not going to get into a discussion about the pubs of High Wycombe either, although I'm sure Sam would like to.
No, his TripAdvisor is pretty good, to be fair, John.
Oh yeah, that's not the pub I was talking about. We're on to any other business, and we're going to wrap this up. So these will need to be quick because it is nearly 10 p.m. We've been going on for a couple of hours. Graham, we'll come back to you. Obviously, last Monday on the bank holiday, Argyle women had their season-defining playoff game against Wolves at the Pirelli Stadium in Burton. And just as with the men's team, it was a season that ended in disappointment, albeit this one probably even greater, given the incredible effort that went into getting that playoff spot in a very tight league where there are not a lot of those spots up for grabs. And yeah, it reminded me a little bit. I watched the first half and then listened to the second half because I had to head out and then sort of stopped to watch the last 10 minutes on my phone. It reminded me a lot of the cup final that I attended against Bournemouth. Yep. Created plenty more chances this time and started the game very well, but couldn't put them away. And I think as the game went on, I don't know if it was nerves or just Wolves getting a handle on us a bit better, but it became a very bitty and scrappy affair.
Yeah,
but yeah, super disappointing.
Wolves had a bit more physicality possibly, and we made, when you're playing out from the back, there's always an opportunity for error, and they pounced on it and scored. And from then we lost a bit of composure, I think, and we had 2 or 3 chances to score late on, and we didn't. And it's such a disappointment because next season is only one team that goes up. This was the opportunity to get up, and
because they're expanding the leagues, we should just make
and coming at a time of investment. I mean, how attractive would a women's team in the WSL2 be if you're that way inclined, looking to invest in the women's game? It would have been better for us, but I just hope we can hold on to Marie. I mean, they're going to have Forceton Park, they're going to be playing at home park. I don't know budgetary wise how they're going to be, because they were going to get 500,000 for getting promoted, and it's back to 50,000, I think. So, yeah, and then you've got the likes of Bournemouth, who, having missed out this season, I'm sure are going to pile in again with more money to try and get promoted next season. So it's going to be a difficult one. I hope we can hold on to Marie, and I hope we can build on the success. And she's shown she's perfectly capable of doing that, but it's going to be a tougher season next year than it was this year, I fear.
Yeah, and Phoebe, I think it was Phoebe Poole, if her leg was, an inch longer, maybe probably would have got something on that ball over the top. And I think their keeper was pretty flat-footed, and it would likely have gone in if she got really anything on it at all. So yeah, very disappointing, but what a campaign that they could be incredibly proud of, and hopefully can go again, just like the men's team, and hopefully we'll have a double promotion to celebrate this time next year. Sam, Aaron, in one of the rare serious comments that he's posted this evening, how bad is it that Owen Aseni is likely to have an international game under his belt before Lauren Talai and Bim Peppel? I know that you are loath to talk about Owen Aseni and how much you rate him, so I'm going to throw this one over to you. He has been called up by Nigeria for a series of games they're playing at the Valley, I believe, at the end of the month.
Yeah, good on him, and I think it maybe says what a slightly bad place Nigeria are in. He's not anywhere near the Ireland team, who believe he was actually born in Ireland. He's eligible for Nigeria through his ancestry. And again, it's not a bad thing that they're after Aseni. Like, I don't think he's a great player, but it's kind of crazy that someone who's seemingly not on Ireland's radar at all is being called up to Nigeria, whereas Nigeria have probably over the past 20, 30 years been a much better team than Ireland. They're a team who go to the World Cup majority of times. They've not qualified, obviously, for this World Cup, of course. But they're maybe having a bit of a scarcity of young talent in Nigeria. But if Owen Aseni is the beneficiary of that, I'm delighted for him, because I think, as I said, he's an absolutely fantastic young player. His goal and assist per minute ratio, I think it's probably, if you include the cups, is probably even better than Talai and Peppel's, or certainly very close. He's very rarely let us down when called upon this season. Even in the dark days of August, he had a couple of really promising performances that, off the bench at Lincoln, got a goal that they pulled it back to 3-2. And obviously was excellent against QPR in the cup, got 2 goals, maybe could have got a couple more. But I think the thing with Aseni is not actually that he's a remarkably clinical finisher or poacher or anything like that. I think his movement is just absolutely spectacular. I think his movement is just electric. He knows exactly where to be. He turns defenders inside out. He's always getting goal side. He has got the pure instinct of a striker. And I think I actually said this very, very early, and John will probably nod his head if he remembers. I said this most at Burton away. He reminds me, at first at Burton away, sorry. He reminds me of nothing so much than Ryan Hardy in his early years with us, in that he's just got that pure thirst for goal, that striker instinct to run with the ball, to get goal side, to harry and harass defenders. And honestly, the more I've seen of him since, I would raise that praise even higher. I think he maybe isn't right now, but I think he probably will be. At his peak will be better than Ryan Hardy, just because I think he's got that more to his locker in terms of close control. He can create as well when he has to. He set Joe Edwards loose for what would have been 1v1 for Huddersfield. That would have put us, I think, 4-1 up, but the great tackle from Bali Mumba dispossessed Edwards. He got 3 assists for Tolai at Doncaster. He got an assist for Tolai, I think, at Barnsley as well. So he's got that creativity in his locker. And I got laughed at saying this in our group chat. It wouldn't surprise me if the level he plays at is actually higher than Tolai and Peppel, because that's not that Tolai and Peppel aren't brilliant. They absolutely have been. But I think in terms of that transferable skill set up to the Premier League, it's kind of like how Hardy was a little bit worse than Ennis in League One, but he was better than Ennis in Championship because that skill set translated better. I think Aseni has absolutely got an enormously high ceiling in terms of where he can get to as a player, and the sky is the limit for him. Like I say, maybe he's benefited a little bit. He's got that call up a little bit earlier than he otherwise would have done due to Nigeria having a bit of a bad spell in terms of their young talent, but he's got it. I really hope first of all, I hope he actually gets a game, not like a certain Jesse Marsh calling up Peppelin and not playing him. So I hope he actually gets a game first and foremost. But if he does, I hope he grabs it with both hands and really takes advantage, because I think all 3 of our strikers have the potential to play in one of the top leagues in Europe, whether that be Premier League or whether it be, Bundesliga or La Liga or something like that. I think all 3 of our strikers have that high level of potential. Yes, thank you, George, for that comment. Speaking of Bundesliga, you were going to ask me about somebody else, weren't you, John?
Yes, that was the final piece of any other business. I was actually going to say, that we could predict what would happen, obviously standing there as fans, in pre-season, looking ahead to a new campaign with a charismatic new manager. And we didn't know what would happen. And, there were always going to be highs and lows. But yes, Schalke have done it. They have been promoted back to the Bundesliga under a certain former Plymouth Argyle manager.
Not only been promoted, they won the championship.
But yeah, and celebrated in Ibiza or wherever it was in a quite interesting fashion, and then went and lost 3-0 to Nuremberg. And Edin Dzeko has come out and said I think they were still feeling the effects. So not actually sure how Miron would have felt about that one, given he doesn't seem like the sort of guy who'd be particularly okay with it. But they did get promoted. Obviously, a huge achievement for them. And yeah, obviously not the most popular character around these parts, and we copped some stick for our poorly understood, funny trip to go and watch Schalke in pre-season as they were training very close to Argyle. But I think he's a manager who's going right to the top, and I've said that since he was here. So
I just want to very quickly say, only Miron Mudlic could win the league as comfortably as he did, scoring less goals than the team came 13th in the league. Only Mudlic could win promotion in that way. But he actually, despite the team scoring so few goals, they only conceded 31 goals all season, and 3 of those 31 were when the team was hung over in the final day of the season after having already been promoted. So they actually only conceded 28 goals from their first 32 games before the final day. And if you had to bet any money on which Argyle manager would win promotion that day, in that fashion of scoring less goals than a lower mid-table team, but also conceding, nearly a quarter less than the next best team, that's the one you would pick. Yeah, certainly he is very much a man of the moment in terms of the cultural zeitgeist of football, where it's going more around set pieces, more around direct football, more around playing a bit deeper line, a bit more conservatively. How long that zeitgeist will last and how well he will adapt if it does change, I don't quite know. But certainly at the moment, he's doing an absolutely fantastic job, despite my personal distaste of him and indeed his style of play. Credit where due, he is a remarkably talented coach. And the job he's doing is absolutely spectacular. And obviously he's going to be in the Bundesliga with Schalke. It wouldn't at all surprise me to see him get a bigger Bundesliga job or even a Premier League job if he does keep up the form the way he's going. So full credit to him for that. And like I said, one piece of genuine affection I will always have for Miran Mudlic. And John will know this is sincere, but I've said it many times off air. I don't have much affection for him generally. It was obviously those cup games, the West Brom win, and he brought the best form out of Ryan Hardy in his 5.5 years at Argyle. Ryan Hardy, a player who will be one of my top 5 or 10 favourite players. He got more out of Hardy than any other manager did in that inside forward role. And I just think that it's a shame in a way he wasn't here for this season, because he would have loved Aseni. He would have absolutely loved Aseni. Putting those two together, that inside forward role, he would have played Aseni every week in that inside forward role. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Sam, I would argue he would love Lauren Tulai even more.
Oh, he'd love both of them, yeah, for sure. If we assume he would have played 3-4-3, which is what he did play in most places, it would have been probably, Aseni, Tulai, and someone else with maybe Peppel as an impact sub.
We should give an honourable mention to Mr. Bundu, because Hanover are in the equal. I think it's 3 teams on the same points, and he scored.
Got an unbelievable goal.
Yeah, so he's got every chance of being a Bundesliga player next season. So who thought that?
Aaron finally asks, why does every photo of Dzeko have Katic lingering around him like a bad smell? I would argue that's the wrong way around, Aaron. It's why does every photo of Katic have Dzeko lingering around him like a bad smell? I'm sure they are very good friends. Right, we've been going for 2 hours pretty much exactly, so I'm going to wrap this up.
Any other former Argyle manager winning the playoff semi-final first leg? No?
Well, mate, a cracking goal by Kozia Dubry.
Oh,
what sort of team would they be without him?
Well, yeah,
still a bad one, Graham. On that bombshell, I will wrap it up. We will be back, I believe, next week with an awards show to close out the season in style. Keep an eye on our Argyle Life social channels. And don't forget, if you don't already, to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. We'll be in your podcast feeds as well at some point, if Aaron gets around to doing it and stops posting nonsense in the comments. And that's it. It's been an amazing campaign. Thank you so much to Graham and Sam for joining me to review it, and to Chris Errington, who was, of course, on with us earlier. And we will all see you very soon.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.